Hey everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. I was having such a great time backstage chatting with our author guest today that I almost lost track of the time. So I hope you're having a great day. And today on the author journey, we will be welcoming back Jon Tattrie. He's been on the show before, so we're happy to have him back. He's the author of 7 published nonfiction books, 2 published novels, and is the past editor of Atlantic Books Today. He holds an MFA in creative nonfiction from the University of King's College and has taught writing at King's, at Dalhousie University, and privately. Jon regularly works with debut authors and the 40-plus Atlantic Canadian publishers who publish their work. He knows what publishers are looking for and how to turn your manuscript into a publishable book, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. He has edited books professionally, including working as a developmental editor for Senator Don Oliver's A Matter of Equality. And today, we're going to start our chat with his latest book. We're going to talk about this beauty that I'm almost finished. I've got, I think, maybe 1 chapter left, and it's been absolutely riveting. To Leave a Warrior Behind, the life and stories of Charles R. Saunders. So let's bring Jon up and welcome him to the author journey. Hey, Jon.
Hello, Anne. Thank you for having me. I've got my my OC mug. I'm good
Yay.
to go.
Thank you so much.
I'm
so delighted to have you back. And like I said, I just was at your book launch, very well attended. I loved that you brought the winners of the award that's in Charles's name to talk about their speculative fiction. That was a very generous thing for you to do, share the spotlight.
Oh, thanks. At first, I tried to get someone to host the book launch, but it kept falling through. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll hire myself to host it. Then I thought, who wants to see me talk for an hour? So yeah, this prize that we created, the Charles R. Saunders Prize for Emerging Writers, it's kind of a sign of how long this book has been in the works, is that I was part of the team that created this award and handed out the first 3 winners before the book got out there. So it was a real joy to have them up there. They've got really cool far out ideas and just amazing people. One of them, the last person who read, Norman Ho, is from Hong Kong and only started speaking English about 4 or 5 years ago, and now he's writing amazing science fiction. It was really exciting.
He was impressive, and I guess as an instructor, that probably warmed your heart as well to see this growth and evolution for these young authors, right?
Yeah, and I'm working on my French. I'm slowly translating To Leave a Warrior Behind into French. So to meet someone who's writing in another language, I'm suddenly truly appreciating what an accomplishment that is.
That is incredible. And if you think in another language than you're writing in, that's quite skillful as far as I'm concerned. Right? Well, and let's talk about the difference. So this is a biography, and I mean, the cover is amazing. And just a shout out to Penguin, McClellan Stewart, your publishers as well. It's a little bit, even though you've written biography and a lot of nonfiction, from Peace by Chocolate to Daniel Paul's story and The Hermit of Africville, this took a bit of a turn though, didn't it?
Yeah, I did my MFA 7 books into my career, and I was plateaued. I just felt like I had run out of ideas for books, and not for the content, but for the way of presenting them. So that was part of the tear down and rebuild, was doing my master's degree and, putting on that white belt. Like they say, you want to be a black belt, you got to keep that white belt mentality. It's your first day every day. So it was really good to do that. And then writing Peace by Chocolate was kind of the first step towards that. But for the Charles one, it's interesting you say that, because the first draft, which I finished around 2021, was a pretty traditional biography. Just started with his early days and just sort of rolled through it. Mm-hmm. And luckily for me, my editor, Joe Lee, he very politely and in different words said, "This kind of sucks. Why don't you look back to your book proposal?" So I looked to the book proposal I had sent to win the contract in the first place, and that was in the first person. That was the call to adventure. So it was interesting to see that I had gotten it right when I was trying to convince them. But then when I sat down to write, it was like I thought, well, you can't have fun in a book. It's got to be stately and keep the readers at bay. But I just thought, no, I want to pull the readers. I want to grab the readers by the ears and haul them into this story and make them fall in love with Charles and emerge from the other side shaken, and we'll never forget him.
Oh, wow. Well, and you had gotten into your journalist head. You know what I mean? Like, just state the facts and, let the chips fall where they may, kind of thing.
Yeah. And also, I think just like it got to like the templates I had in my head for what a biography is, and for letting myself into the book. Because of course, often, like with The Hermit of Africa about Eddie Carvery, I wasn't in that book at all, and probably rightly so, because it shone the light on him. But for this one, and it also really worked. I really liked it because it worked kind of as a meta book, because in this book, a lot of people are not going to know much about fantasy writing. They're not going to know anything about Charles. I'm assuming most of my readers will not know anything about him on page 1.
Yeah.
So I had to do something different. So by putting myself in it, I can be kind of the stupidest person in the book. And I didn't understand much about fantasy. I didn't understand much about Charles. I knew him, but I didn't know him, it turns out. So by letting myself into the book, I can be your fish out of water.
Right. And what a multi-layered, fascinating individual. And which draft of the book were you working on when you discovered the box of correspondence, or when you got the letters that really wound up playing a huge part?
There were 2 main sort of collections of letters I got, because that was the first thing. Charles died in 2020. I got into it because somebody just emailed me saying he'd gone missing at the start of the pandemic. It was the start of the pandemic. Everyone had gone missing. So I couldn't go to his house, so I had to search for him online. And it was just that search that kept building. And it was when we did he was in an unmarked grave, so we held an online fundraiser and managed to raise $17,000 in 24 hours. That was the first clue I had that there are some serious Charles Saunders fans out there in the world that I didn't know about.
Right.
That they ponied up money. And one of the people, like, I went through all of the comments from the donators, and one of them had gone to university with Charles in the 1960s. So I wrote to him, Morris Reed, and we exchanged back and forth a few times. And he told me he had letters from Charles. And, I worked for a while to win his trust. And he started sending me letters every week, because Charles and him had been friends in the 60s and had started writing letters in the 80s, and had written 3 letters, 4 letters a year constantly for decades. And Moore started sending those to me once a week. So that was the first time I started to think there might be enough material here as well. But then the huge breakthrough you mentioned was Charles DeLint. And anyone who knows fantasy knows the name Charles DeLint. He's been at the top of the Canadian fantasy world for a very long time. And he and Charles started out together in Ottawa in the 1980s. They were really close buddies in the very early days of both their careers. And Charles DeLint, so I tried to interview him. He was dealing with a personal tragedy at the time and wasn't really able to talk with me. So after kind of pushing me off for a couple of months, I just opened the door one day, and there was this huge box that's behind me now, 100 pounds probably of letters from Charles from the 1970s. Right up till almost the month of his death, and unpublished manuscripts, first drafts, a 40-page interview transcript from the 1980s that I don't think ever got published. So once I got that sort of motherlode from Charles DeLint, I thought, I've got, not only do I have enough to write a book, but it's getting to the point where it'd be criminal to not write the book.
Not to, right. I was, when thinking about that and the boxes of material that you had, and the variety of resources and references, how you, in my mind, skillfully like interspersed and, and sort of categorically and thematically wove in, the discoveries of who Charles was, the Charles that you didn't know, even though you thought you knew him. And I just want to bring up, Wikipedia is not always my favorite source of information, but just to share some of this. So you knew that he had written a fantasy novel, right?
That's
when
right.
you were working with him.
He gave me the copy himself. That was the only reason I knew. He handed it to me when he heard this. I learned was classic Charles. He learned I was an aspiring writer at the time, and so he welcomed me to the family.
Right. And you talk about aspiring writers. He was a pen pal, like wrote longhand to anybody he met that might, that they had something in common or he could help and nurture. That to me just says so much about somebody.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that started to emerge was like when he first died, all of our, I worked with him on the Halifax Daily News. If you can see that S just out of frame there, that's the S from the Daily News I ripped off the wall after the paper closed in 2008.
Oh, over behind you?
There you go. See on the door there? The Superman S there?
Oh, hang on. Oh, the S at the end of Daily News.
Yeah, exactly. When they closed the paper down on my birthday in 2008, I hauled that off the wall in a fit of rage. And
wow.
So that's where I knew Charles in person. And
Right.
after his death, like once it took a few months even to realize that he had died. So by the time I learned he had died, it was a cold case for several months.
Right.
So all of his friends here in Nova Scotia were really upset. But then I published an obituary for CBC. And then I started to hear from people all over North America and beyond. And they all sounded like they were Charles's only best friend in the world. And none of them knew anybody else who knew Charles.
Wow.
And even the person who wrote to me, like after I got this email saying, "Can you looking on Charles? He's gone missing." I thought, why are they writing to me? Nobody knew I knew Charles, but it turned out that a decade ago he had marched this person into a bookstore and got them to buy The Hermit of Africville, and so they had that book. So they didn't even know that he knew me. They just knew he had recommended this book. So on a shot in the dark, they wrote to me. But I tracked down these best friends, and that's where most of them came from. Is to us it looked like he was living alone, but from his point of view, he was not only writing these letters, but he was getting a letter from someone every couple of weeks. And these aren't just like round robin, here's the Christmas updates. These were like deeply personal letters, and often calling back to things from decades ago. And I don't think Charles kept his letters. Judging by how he wrote, he never referred to old letters. So I don't think he had copies of what he had sent or old copies. So he just remembered. And for many of these people, like David C. Smith, he's a writer too. I've actually got his new book right here. He's an American author. This is his new book on how to write Sword and Soul, Sword and Sorcery, rather. And he knew Charles from the 1970s right up till the end. They had the most intimate conversations because David shared all of his letters with me. They never met in person once.
Wow.
Never spoke on the phone, never saw a video of Charles. And so, Charles is just like the truest of authors, he preferred to live on the page, even with people.
Right. And what's, fascinating is, I now have added his books to my TBR pile. I used to love science fiction fantasy, and I don't know why I got away from it, but it's so fascinating that, when his family when you finally found them, asked you to describe them, and you said he was tall, quiet, and brilliant. But you know what they say, still waters run deep. And some of the excerpts that you included from Imaro, really kind of start to expose sort of that the darkness that was in his own soul, right?
Yeah. So like sword and sorcery, like in terms of genre, and like I wrote this book for people who aren't into the genres of speculative fiction at all, but for those who want to know, there's fantasy and then there's sword and sorcery. That's Conan the Barbarian. That's your classic progenitor of the whole genre. Charles loved all that stuff, loved that writing, that epic faux history of a kind of semi-realized world. So the first move he did to make it sword and soul was to make it black, to set it in Africa, real Africa. He calls it Nyumbani, but with real people. So as I was following his characters, Imaro's journey, or Desoyi, his female warrior's journey through Nyumbani, you can track it on the map behind me, and he's going through real Africa. Charles had never been there. How he did this in the 1970s and 80s, to the degree of people, he would cut out pictures from National Geographic. So if he's talking to, like Imaro is an Iliasai, which is based on the Maasai in our world. So all of the other Iliasai look like the Maasai in our world. They have the same cultural traditions. So I think that was the first step he did. But you pointed to the second one, which is the soul part, because I managed to get his. I don't know if I can find it here, but his unpublished. like before it went to the printer, the proof copies of
Wow.
the original book. There were about 6 of them made, and I
Yeah.
paid a small fortune to get my hands on one. So reading that and reading the magazines he'd had before, you could see the changes he made. And he never made big sweeping changes for the most part. It
Yeah.
was always subtle. Like I would notice that if I read in the modern books that Imaro looked at Tanisha, his wife, with sorrow, that would trigger me. And I'd go back and look at the first, and he would glare at her with hatred. And it was those sort of things. Like they were early on two incompatible people
Right.
just in that sword and sorcery external world, just went through all the actions. But the soul
Right.
part, I think, takes it, and that's what makes it beyond something for Black people to read and write, and makes it a universal literary accomplishment, I think, is
Right.
adding that psychological depth and realism.
And you mentioned that, Charles loved the genre, and he, loved Tarzan and Conan, but he also felt there was, a dearth of stories of that nature that reflected any Black culture.
Yeah.
And even though Tarzan was set in Africa, it was a little bee in his bonnet that the character wasn't Black and should have been.
Yeah,
Like,
Tarzan was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my head around, because reading him as a grown man who's written books about racism, it just seemed, that was my first impression. Well, this is ancient old British thinking about white people being the natural inheritors of the world, and the Black people in Africa were just, a mistake that happened to end up there or whatever. But what the hard part to understand was that Charles loved Tarzan first. That as a kid, he absolutely that was his first introduction to speculative fiction, to writing of the imagination, which he loved from start to finish. And sometimes people can think speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, it can be like a dumbed down version. You just follow the plot points. But he never saw that. He always saw it as the only free space, because literary writing, literary novels have all of their tropes too, all of their conventions too. And so he
and
felt
limitations.
and limitations. He felt that speculative fiction was the only way you can truly write free. And so for him, he loved Tarzan until he sort of grew up and got his education. And as he said, he always wanted to see a Black man come out of the jungle and kick Johnny Westmuller's ass. That was the Tarzan actor in the movies. And that's where Imaro roots from, I think. But it went beyond that. Imaro became a very real person. I read a ton of Conan books, and you never get any deeper into his character. You're always looking at him from a distance, and he's always happy if he's killed everybody and he's eating a meal. You never guess. He's going to be in a sour mood at the moment of his greatest victory, for all you know. He's a complex person, just like Charles.
Very, very, very complex. And and Charles being complex, you say like he was quiet, but he was a big man, but he obviously had a sense of humor as well.
Yeah. And I realized part of the reason I felt I had to write this book was I was in a very unusual position of knowing Charles well in person, because we worked the night shift together for 2 years on the Halifax Daily News. And all of us who worked with him loved him and highly respected him as a journalist. He's a very accomplished journalist, especially in the 1990s here. None of us knew about this side of his life at all. And once I realized that everybody who did know about this side of his life, the people like Tack Kirksey, Uraeus, Milton Davis, who brought out his late career renaissance, all of these critical Black figures in his life, they never knew him in person. So having spent 2 years sitting with him, and yes, I knew he loved a terrible headline. He loved a horrible pun. Like the first one I think he ever wrote was in his college newspaper, where he labeled a picture of the tall and short of university life over a picture of a very tall Charles and a very short person. Just the corniest, what do you call a boy who lives on the beach? Sandy? He just... As one of my friends, Judy Kavanaugh, said, he just liked to make people laugh. He looked very serious, and he was very intimidating. And I think especially because he was a Black man in white Canada, it was intimidating enough. And you add in the fact that he was a Black man in a world with lots of half racist white people who don't quite know what to do with someone like Charles.
And he's not going to take a back seat, right? So would you read just a short excerpt for us?
Yeah. What should I read from? You've been reading the book, Anne. What do you think?
Oh my goodness!
Should I start with the beginning, or was there something in the middle that caught your attention?
Really, everything caught my attention. one of the things that I thought I'm going to have to look for that Dungeons and Dragons. I never did play Dungeons and Dragons, but you mentioned that Urias, the young publisher that he started working with, was it him that found somebody who created
Nishenga Kunda, yeah.
characters in Dungeons and Dragons that were
That's
the
right.
first Black characters, right?
Yeah. Like his
Like,
impact was sizable. How about
yeah,
I'll read a little bit from the start? Do you wanna just
yep.
tell me to stop talking when when I've gone too far?
Just
How
read a
about I hold
page.
up like this so people can see it as I'm reading?
Okay, but don't block your voice.
Okay. Yes. So this is from the very start. So this is what I eventually got right after 6 years of writing and rewriting. The call to adventure came from a stranger in July 2020. It was a regular day in that plague year. Amid mix of work emails came one from an address I didn't know, but with a subject line that immediately pulled me in. Charles Saunders. Hi, John. I'm hoping you might know or know about the writer Charles Saunders, who lives in Dartmouth, the message opened. Reading his name conjured up strong images of the towering newspaper editor I'd worked with a decade ago. Built like a heavyweight boxer, but he moved like a cat. A genius with words and a wealth of writing wisdom, Charles was the senior editor on the Halifax Daily News and had written an iconic column on Black issues. The Daily News was a scrappy newspaper that broke a few noses in our city. Politicians feared us, and regular folks cheered us. I'd started working there as a night shift copy editor in 2006. One colleague said working on the newsroom was like doing your homework with friends late at night. We'd fall into a studious silence as we cleaned up the writing, checked the facts, and crafted the headlines, then burst into laughter when someone, occasionally Charles, made a pun too rude to publish, but too delightful not to share. Often, as the laughter faded, one of us would look over to the center of the rim, where Charles sat, with his back to us, facing the Halifax harbor, to ask him if we'd accidentally split an infinitive, only to find his empty chair spinning. He disappeared once more. You want me to keep going?
I love that. Oh, that's good. And what was your most your favorite memory of Charles?
It's so complicated now because I have it's like, that illusion you look at, the old woman, young woman illusion. I feel like
Yes,
that, although it's the Charles I knew and the author Charles. And at this point, I'm very jumbled up. I feel like
everything's
I've
kind
spent the
of
last 6 years with him. Like this wasn't a normal book. Like I felt
right.
like I literally woke up in the middle of the night saying, "Where is his body?" It felt like a guided process, and the way that this one moment in time opened up where all of
Mhm.
his friends had come together, all of his letters were there. I think if I tried to write the book today, it would have blown away and I wouldn't have been able to
Mm.
find the people that I did.
Mhm.
So my favorite memory from Charles, the person in real life, yeah, I would say so. Back then, I was trying to make it as a writer, trying to do anything. My big idea at the time was to write a feature called How to Get Published. And my plan was to go talk to all the publishers and say, "How do you get published? I'm a writer," and hoping they'd read my article. It worked. It worked. Uh, but so Charles knew I was doing this, and he walked over one day and he handed me Imaro. And at the time, it meant a lot to me because, as I say, like Charles was at the top of my list. He was one of my great heroes before I knew a thing about his fiction, from his work on Africville,
Wow.
his work on journalism, and just he was a formidable writer. We could tell that from his journalism.
Mhm.
So to have him at the time, I just thought he was another journalist with a novel in his top drawer. Well done, Charles. But it
Mhm.
still was a huge moment to me because it was an accomplished, highly respected writer looking at me, then a completely unpublished. I hadn't even got a byline out yet. This was my first byline I was working on. And that he just welcomed me as a peer. And looking
Wow.
back now, knowing what was going on in his life at the time, it amazes me even more the thought that he would even think of me, because he was going through a
Wow.
lot at that time with his own publishing life, his own personal life, but he
Yep.
still listened enough to me chattering on the rim to welcome me in. So
No. So then over the last 6 years, what was the biggest aha moment or your favorite the favorite thing that you uncovered about his his
Well,
life?
one thing, it's not quite an uncovery, but the thing that comes to mind, maybe my favorite experience, posthumous experience with Charles, was so we, in early 2021, we managed to get his grave marked. We held a funeral for him
Mm.
in 2021. So that was an amazing, amazing event. You're about to go there, Anne, in a couple of chapters.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
But after that, I had been talking to a friend of his in Ottawa who he had known early in his time in Canada. He moved here in 1969 to avoid the Vietnam War, stayed in Ontario for 15 years, and then moved to Nova Scotia in 1984. And I talked to this friend quite a bit. It was one of those interviews where sometimes I can like sense something that's not being said. You can see a
Mm.
hole in someone's life. So I won't go into what the hole in Charles's life was, but I could see something had ruptured in his life that had sent him on a completely different course when he moved from Ottawa to Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
And she was the best source for that. And the first time I talked to her, she didn't mention the thing I thought might be there, but I heard it from a few other people and brought it back to her. And that time she did share the story with me. But the memory that kind of triggers, when she came to Halifax, we went out to Charles's grave and cleaned the stone, kind of.
Wow.
Yeah, it was almost like washing the body in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe that we're almost running out of time, but I want to make sure that we also get in. You made a comment about doing the story about how to get published.
Yeah.
And, let's segue a little bit over to, some of the other work that you do and some of the work that we do together as well.
Yeah.
You were integral in the last book that we published, Inside Indonesia's Big Bang. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's on my
Um,
shelf behind me. It's facing, you can only see the spine though, so you can't quite
yeah,
see the cover,
well,
but it's right behind
there
me.
it is. And so you've worked with some OC publishing authors, you've worked with some Paradise writers. So you also wear a hat of an author coach.
Yeah.
Um, Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I started right
Service of
now
that.
with Jon Tattrie a couple of years ago. And at the time, I kind of thought of it as your path to publication.
Hmm.
Wherever you are, I'll meet you there. And wherever you want to be, I'll guide you there. The
Hmm.
last year or so, I've moved more into kind of the independent publisher's best friend. So the way I look at it depends. Like I think every writer has a different goal. Not every writer wants a traditional publisher. Not every writer, they all have different goals for their book. So that's the first thing is I
Hmm.
want to see, what do you want to do with this book? Some
Hmm.
people, it's they've been working on it for ages and they just want the thing done and published so they can print it. And so that's one of my most exciting things I've learned recently is to use Vellum to help people turn manuscripts into books.
Hmm.
But that's an independent writer's best friend. So if you want guidance for approaching publishers or guidance for working with hybrid publishers like OC Publishing, I like to be able to refer people. And from my time at Atlantic Books today, I know all of the publishers here. As you
Hmm.
mentioned, my last book was through Penguin, so I know up to the top of the food chain. I know how the whole industry works. And most writers, I find they type the end, and then they look up and try to figure out how the industry.
Right,
That's when I
right.
put my hand up and say, press the easy button. This is the
Yeah,
easy button
come
to
to
make things
us.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings me great joy. And I can see you light up when you talk about, the authors that you're working with and, helping somebody bring like an idea through, the writing and editing out to the world, in whatever way, they choose to, with whatever pathway. And there are a lot of pathways to publication. But I think that a good message, that is obvious here in what we're talking about, is to seek out, the people that can help you accomplish that goal, right?
Yeah. And I find, yeah, a lot of writers, they don't know how the world works. So they take rejection personally. They take the not hearing from a publisher personally. So even just that quick conversation to kind of explain, there's the commercial presses like
Mhm,
Penguin. They're looking
mhm,
for a book that can sell 20,000 copies. That's the starting point for them. There's the
mhm,
cultural presses like Pottersfield, which has done a lot of my books. They
mhm,
get grants, so they're looking for culturally important books that fit into their publishing schedule. And
mhm.
so often people hit those two walls and they think it's because their book
That's
isn't good
it,
enough. But
right?
if you've written an amazing book in Atlantic Canada about how to master your finances, you probably won't find a local publisher because their grant rules don't allow them to publish self-help books.
Mm-hmm.
You have no way of knowing that. So just even that first explain the chaos of these hundreds of publishers out there. I find it helps people to understand, and it helps them clarify. And we writers, we live on sales. It's a funny thing. We can cry if most books sell, to break the secret, most books sell dozens of copies. Some sell hundreds, some sell thousands. And then there's Rachel Reed,
heated rivalry.
Salute them in their rocket ships as they go off to glorious success.
Right.
But the funny thing is, most of the people I work with, and I know the people you work with too, like Mark working with him, they're not in it for the money, which is funny that we're not in it for the money, and yet that's how we measure the outcome, and we feel brokenhearted if it doesn't sell. But I'm trying to change that. Like some of the books I work with people on, they want literally one copy. They want a family heirloom telling their story. They don't want anyone to buy it. They don't want it in bookstores. They want it so that in 100 years, their great-great-grandchildren will know how their family came to be here.
Yes. So and yeah, absolutely. And from personal experience, I can also say, as you can, that holding that book in your hand, ebooks are important, but the latest research shows that it's really half and half. So, there's still a lot of demand for like an actual hard copy print book. And from my perspective as a publisher, that's what we start with. We start with the actual print copy. Then we do the conversion. We're a certified accessible ebook publisher. But there's always both. But having that copy in your hand, like, look at this. And you know what? It's the rare author who I will buy the hardcover, but this one was definitely one. So
I just love it gives me shivers to look at it, because it was, for so long writing this book, I did not think it would come to be. I didn't think it would.
And it's signed. Yay.
And the other thing was the cover, because there were so few pictures of Charles, and they're all like Facebook reposts. So there were no high quality pictures of him. So we struggled for ages, but then we came across a genius designer who works for McClellan Stewart, and he was able to enhance this one photo we do have. And this is Imaro in his sunglasses. I've been talking about Imaro. This is Imaro, and this is Charles. He looks like he was just struck by lightning, right? Like you feel the electricity. And this is what it was like to look in his eyes, really.
I love it.
The most distinct thing about him is he didn't have sunglasses on, or Imaro, but just looking at him, not knowing anything about his inner life, you could tell there was a lot in there.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
The service counter of Charles R. Saunders, there was worlds inside there. And it was such a joy to explore as many of them as I could and to put it together in this.
Oh, well, it's brilliant. I'm loving it. Like I said, I think I was almost late coming on because I'm like, I want to finish it, but it is wonderful. I love all your books, so it doesn't surprise me. And I also really enjoy working with you. And amazingly, we're at a time, but we could go on and on. There's a lot going on in the industry. Let's stay in touch. For folks who are looking for a little guidance, visit jontattrie.ca. And of course, you can also visit ocpublishing.ca to learn more about the hybrid model of publishing. And I hope you're enjoying the author journey. And thank you again, Jon, so much for joining us today. and you'll have to come back soon.
Yes.
Excellent. And thank you for joining us on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing. I hope you're reading a great book. I hope you're out there supporting the arts and indie authors, because they sure do. They need the love. So get out there and buy a locally authored book and do reviews. So we'll see you next week on the author journey. Bye for now.